welcome to the Human Frequency on American Freedom Radio, coming to you live from the chemtrail-free slopes of the San Emilio Mountains in Southern California. We're back from contact in the desert, having survived triple-digit temperatures, an up-close and personal encounter with a California common scorpion, several throngs of hippies, a thin layer of dust on everything. Okay, what I'm trying to say here is it's good to be back home again.
I had contact with a salad from a hippie food truck, and that left me quite debilitated for 2.5 days.
Oh boy. Those hippies, you'd think they could at least get food right.
Well, it was delicious, but I think that the heat got to that salad. Anyway, it was pretty brutal. I wasn't expecting it to be that way. I think I glamorized it a little bit in my mind because this was our first time there. And it was a little bit rougher than I expected. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. And I think the general consensus at this event, at least amongst the vendors, as far as they were concerned, it was just unnecessarily brutal. And the wind and the dust and the heat, it's, the people who were attending, they were just so preoccupied with trying to avoid heat stroke and dehydration that they couldn't really turn their attention towards exploring the vending area that much.
Not too much. Well, I think that it turns out it's Coachella for smart people. That's what I think this event was. So it was kind of, a rough desert experience. Not that I've ever been to Coachella because, I'm a smart person. I like good music. Okay, anyway, I don't mean to bag on everybody at Coachella, but let's get real here. The vendor area was not even on the map for contact. So we were kind of isolated out in the parking lot.
Thanks, guys. Like it's so difficult to put vendor area on the map,
And I should have been speaking because I ended up having to do one-on-one seminars in the tent for 3 days.
Repeatedly.
Right. But I customized them to the individuals. Some people asked me about weather modification. Some people wanted to know about psychic attacks. And there were so many topics to cover. I was able to go into desertification and the cause of deserts as discovered by Wilhelm Reich. So I was able to talk about a variety of topics. I would have liked to gather like 20 people into the tent at once, so I wouldn't have to do a separate seminar for each person. Maybe next year I'll be speaking there.
Yeah. Well, then you get the fire marshal coming through saying, you can't block this lane. There has to be a clear path or whatever.
Well, that was the only contact we had with the staff. So
that's right.
I mean, they ignored us other than that.
Yeah.
But,
Anyhow, so yeah, there were some problems, but there were a lot of good things that happened at this event. And, let's talk about that for a little while because this is a big event. There are a lot of people coming and going and, we were bound to run into some good folks.
We sure did. I finally met Jim Mars in person, which was amazing because Jim and I have been working together. We had worked together on a radio show, The View from Mars, and that was back on Talk Network. So I finally met him in person, which was great. And, Laura Eisenhower was a brilliant genius.
As always.
As usual. I really love her. She went into great depth on very advanced topics. Stuff that's maybe a little over a lot of people's heads, but she was way on it as far as the collapse of the fourth, fifth, and sixth dimensions that we used to have here on our Earth.
Well, she just went for it.
Yeah, it was amazing. She was under some kind of stress too, as all of us were. And I did a little prayer for her with Holly to alleviate her stress because she had a lot to deal with and everybody wants to talk to her. And, I don't know what that's like to be that well known for what you do, but she's so sincere in what she does. She's not about the celebrity persona at all.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of a little bit of an opposite of what she's looking for.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes you can totally tell when these people are just milking their status to the nth degree. Mm-hmm. But I definitely picked up on the fact that she's just channeling. She's doing whatever comes to her and speaking and broadcasting it to whoever will listen. And it was a good event. There, on the flip side of that, there are a lot of people that are just doing the very basic 3D intro to this stuff. And she kind of went above and beyond.
Yeah, that was one of my issues. I didn't go to a ton of the talks because as a vendor, it was pretty hard to do that. And we were pretty busy actually over there in the vendor area, despite the 3-digit temperatures and nobody wanting to walk around.
And despite the conspicuous absence of the vendor area from the guide map.
I know people would come over and say, I didn't even know this was here. Thanks, guys. Do you know what it costs to be a vendor at Contact? I mean, it'd be nice to at least get written on the map. But anyway,
Yeah.
I complain and complain. I was complaining a lot at Contact because I was getting heat stroke, and I didn't get heat stroke, but I got heat exhaustion. By Saturday, I was kind of a wreck. I was drinking gallons and gallons of water and literally drinking water constantly.
I think everyone was.
Yeah.
Everyone was just drinking and drinking and drinking because it's obvious that you have to drink that much when you're out there. But
I didn't even use the bathroom though. I was drinking and
I was
not
just
even...
I was gonna speak for myself, but then I realized, wait a minute, this happened to at least 3 other people I talked to.
I spoke to a lot of people about
we were
that.
just drinking and drinking, and it seemed to just be the whole amount that we were all drinking just seemed to be being absorbed by our bodies, and not we weren't like losing any of it.
Right, and I had no appetite. I guess that's good for weight loss. But by the time I finally ate food, it was too much to deal with. Anyway, I was getting this heat exhaustion. I wandered into the sanctuary where there was a talk going on. This particular talk going on, it sounded like a lot of new age nonsense, to be honest. A lot of the talks were really good. Some of them were a little off. I'm not naming any names. I don't even know who was speaking at the moment, but I was so woozy. I laid down next to a really large dog who was also kind of exhausted from the heat, I could tell. And just, I drank a bunch of water, laid down, tried to cool off in the AC. It was pretty hard. But once I kind of recovered, I was able to go back. But the next day, the heat exhaustion got to me to the point where I couldn't even handle it. I stumbled into Noble Hall this time and went, just in there to get the AC. And fortunately, a nurse, somebody who used to be a nurse, was one of the vendors there, and she helped me out. So, thank you, Nurse Susan, for helping me out. She took me into the bathroom, told me to lay down on the tile floor. She got me one of these nice little Contact in the Desert bandanas that has this cooling stuff in it, so it cools you off. I think for $425 and up for the vendor booths, it would have been nice if the staff came and passed those around to us.
Or just came in general and said hello.
Yeah, hello would have been nice.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway.
Instead of just leaving us to be scorched. And I got to tell you, we camped out because, we could have gotten a hotel, but we didn't want to cut into our profits that much. But it's a little exorbitant. But we camped, we set up our tent. I'd say we were about 200 yards or so from the vending area. So
I think that was more than that. It seemed like quite a trek.
Well, I play golf, so I think in terms of yards.
Okay. It's 3 feet is a yard. So yeah, okay, 200 yards, 600 feet, maybe. I think it was farther than that.
Well,
it felt like half a mile.
it felt like 10 miles, but no, it was a little disconcerting on the last day to pack up our tent and then lift up the tarp that we'd used underneath the tent and then see a 6-inch yellow and gray scorpion lumber off into the trees. Like, oh, that's good. That's nice to know that we could have had that thrown into our desert experience as well.
So when I was walking back from the shower on Sunday night and got this gigantic round sticker the size of a golf ball stuck in the bottom of my foot.
Speaking of golf.
And I couldn't get it out with my hand because then it stuck in my hand and I had to use a twig to get it out. And then fortunately I had
then
a
it
tweezer.
Just stuck in the twig.
Yeah, and then finally I had to put my glasses on and get my flashlight and my tweezers, which I luckily had with me, and pluck all the thorns out of my foot. I suppose that was actually a fortunate experience, rather than getting stung by a scorpion.
Yeah, that requires, and I have sort of a knowledge of scorpions, and I know enough to know that they're kind of like hot peppers. It's the smallest ones that do the most damage, and this was a medium-sized one, so we're talking at the very least a hospital visit. Maybe not any potentiality for death or anything lethal like that, but.
Well, by Sunday night, I thought I was going to have to go to the hospital because I was getting chest pains and nausea, and I didn't know what was going on. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is we glamorize events like this, but there can be a lot of dangerous aspects, and you're pretty much on your own. People are very nice and helpful, though, when they see you suffering. On Saturday, no one was helpful to me. They just kind of chewed me out for stepping in front of the cameras when I went into the sanctuary. But on Sunday, Nurse Susan helped me out. And so there was a lot of kindness out there, too. And anyway, it was one of the lessons I learned there was actually very, it hit me right in my heart. which was about the desertification of the West. So while I was trudging to the tent one day in the hot sun to get some supplies we needed, I was walking across dead yellow grass, thorny plants, dead branches, dead trees lying across the ground. Everything was just in a state of utter decay, and it was 100 degrees. And I felt so much suffering walking through the desert. And then I thought to myself, I'm suffering for 4 days in the desert. Mother Earth has been bombarded in this region for 25,000 years. And the decay going on here, Wilhelm Reich found, and I really believe this to be true, was done on purpose. That this was an attack on our Earth, and the deserts are not the natural condition of Earth. Because he found the interplanetary aspect of this. He found that there was a war going on against our planet, which totally goes along with what we learned from Zecharia Sitchin and so many others on the origins of mankind.
Mm-hmm.
The origins of mankind and the scorching of our Earth. We were bred as a slave race. We're going to get more into that later.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that a little more too.
Yeah, we will. As far as the desertification, I was able to transmute my suffering into knowledge. And I used that suffering to understand what the plants and animals and the earth herself go through in that region. And as beautiful as I've always thought Joshua Tree was, I mean, I love Joshua Tree. We went there for my last birthday to do a gifting project.
Mm-hmm.
I love to go there. I saw my first UFO in Joshua Tree in '99. The place holds a lot of significance to me in my life and beauty. But the summer in Joshua Tree, it really hits home what our Earth goes through with these artificial deserts. They are artificial. The Sahara, for instance. That was thought to be the result of an ancient nuclear disaster.
That's right.
Deadly energy is what causes deserts. And by lifting the deadly energy, Wilhelm Reich found, the deserts could be regreened.
Yeah, there's no good reason for a desert that large to exist that close to the equator. There's absolutely no reason for it.
You're talking about the Sahara?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's definitely man-made or made by someone, I think. Okay, This is my opinion. I really believe we don't know our history anyway. The history books can't tell us, and so many of our history books have been burned anyway.
Mm-hmm. Jim Marrs talks a lot about that. I mean, all over the globe throughout history, just an inestimable number of volumes just up in flames, lost forever, like thousands upon thousands. At this point, I'd even guess millions. I mean, between the Catholic Inquisition and the sacking of cities like Constantinople and Carthage, and it goes on and on. Asia Minor, the Far East, the Mid East, all over the globe, you have book burnings and just destruction of works. It's impossible to know everything, and consequently, we have to rely on these scattered fragments, these very meager accounts of things, and things would be so much different today if even just a small percentage of those libraries and volumes of work had remained intact.
Well, this is why so many people went to Contact. This is why it's becoming such a popular event. We want to know our origins, and now we're learning that there is an intergalactic aspect to our origins. We didn't just evolve from monkeys one day. People want to know. There's so much pointing to extraterrestrial intervention.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Jim Marrs wrote about this in Alien Agenda. That's a great book on this. There are many, many people talking about this, and I'd like to know more about Zecharia Sitchin. That's my next thing I've got to look into, the Sumerian texts, and really understanding our origins. I think sorely missing from the conversation at Contact was a discussion of Wilhelm Reich's work.
Yeah, because conspicuously absent, and across the board too. Like we listened to a couple things here and there, but we had people coming up to us in our vendor booth that were talking with us, and we asked periodically, like, is anyone talking about orgone energy or its application or the ET connection in terms of that? Right. And the answer all the time was nope.
Well, it needed to be included because of the ET connection, and this is what is just completely missing from all discussions. A discussion of geoengineering and chemtrails without a discussion of orgone is missing half the story. Then, I mean, these are higher levels of thinking, though, which actually chase some people away when you get into it. There's an ET aspect, and this is what Wilhelm Reich discovered, was that geoengineering, climate modification on our Earth was far beyond the work of our government. It's something that had been going on for tens of thousands of years and had been destroying our Earth with desertification. So, as you know, the drought in California is caused by geoengineering, and we're breaking it down with orgone. Wilhelm Reich wanted to learn the cause of deserts and drought. And he didn't even think of ETs when he was doing his work.
No, it just kind of happened and unfolded and came to him.
Right. So he was studying deserts in the Southwest. What causes deserts? He brought his cloudbuster because he theorized that there was a deadly energy causing it, and he was correct.
Mm-hmm.
When he used his cloudbuster to draw out the deadly energy and infuse the life-giving orgone into the atmosphere, he saw UFOs. This was not what he expected to see. He saw the craft in the sky. He saw what he thought were stars that would flicker and fade and retreat. Once they retreated in the face of the cloudbuster, he knew these weren't stars because a star can't retreat.
Right.
The stars don't move around. So he then aimed his cloudbuster at these stars. And when he did that, they disappeared. So he then actually renamed. This is where people start to think he's a complete wacko and losing it. He renamed the cloudbuster the space gun and became engaged in interplanetary battle. That sounds like science fiction, but this was his life and this is our life, and we take on his work.
And he detailed it all.
Yes.
Factually.
And the Air Force, too, found out about this. He let them know. He thought they would be interested in the fact that we were under assault from extraterrestrials, and they sure were interested. Yeah. They gave him a survey that asked what kind of UFOs he saw. And
this is a pre-made template.
It already had it all written out. Yeah. They knew they were up there. So they gave him the survey. They had him fill it out. They were very pleased to be informed of his activities, as was the Weather Bureau. And they were not interested in working with him on fighting the ET menace. They weren't interested because they'd already made deals with him. And this is what we learned from Canadian Defense Minister Hellier, about the deals that the U.S. government made with the Greys. In order to get their technology, they exchanged our human lives for experimentation.
And that's a pretty bad exchange.
Well, yeah, it's completely uncool, okay?
Not cool, guys.
Not cool.
Well, the thing that fascinates me about Reich's desert excursion and his work out there was the fact that even before he reinfused the life energy, just the removal of the death energy was enough to do so much. Just the presence of that was just completely squashing the life in that region and beyond. He noticed it throughout his whole trip, but once he removed it, just the removal was enough to make huge progress in that region. And then, of course, that's when what he called the Aya, that's when they came and he started to do battle with them. And it's fascinating stuff.
Well, the first thing that happened when he aimed his cloudbuster at the atmosphere was that green grass started to grow around him in the desert, and this was without rain. So simply the removal of death energy allowed life to grow again. And I saw in Joshua Tree how dead everything was. It's a new perspective when you know that deserts are unnatural. You see it completely differently, and you have a greater understanding of the death energy affecting our Earth. So Reich found green grass growing before the rain even fell, and he found the Aya. Primordial energy is what he called them. That's what it means. Those were the UFO craft that he saw. So this was a topic that I was able to talk about in the booth with many people, and it was of great interest because we were at contact. I could talk freely about the ET influence and how it was causing the climate modification on Earth.
Yeah, it's not like we sit up on Hollywood Boulevard and we get these dumb tourists that come by. These people are...
Hey, those tourists are the lifeblood of Los Angeles. Let's not bag on them.
Well, I'll do that on another
LA
episode.
has nothing else, after all.
That's right. But we were at an event where people were receptive from the get-go. Right. So we were able to talk about that. And, okay. Contact in the desert. Joshua Tree in June. What the hell? Why not April or November? That's what I was wondering. And I think everyone else was wondering that too.
I know. That was actually a huge thing. So that leads me into more of the suffering aspect. And I'm not really saying I know what's going on here, but I was given a little piece of information by a friend who said that the event was kind of a front for it was funded by Rockefeller or something. Now I don't know if that's true. I mean, that's just something someone said, but I don't know why we have to be stuck there in the desert in the summer with Nestle water. But anyway, I'm not going to make any assumptions, but there's definitely
It's interesting
yeah,
though.
it's an interesting point.
It's an
And
interesting sidebar, I think.
well, there was definitely the controlled opposition element. There's a oversimplified 3D aspect to a lot of the talks on UFOs. Now, I'm not saying this is across the board. I mean, there are people that really acknowledged higher dimensions of human consciousness, which was a huge part of the event. But some of the discussions they're a little on the elementary side to me. Okay. I mean, to a lot of people, just talking about UFOs is pretty advanced stuff. But I also know that there are these really high dimensions to it. So I would love to know more. And I also feel that if anybody from the military or government is giving us information, I'm skeptical of that information automatically.
Yes.
Even if they're termed whistleblowers, I'm automatically skeptical of
Mm-hmm.
anyone from the military or government. There was somebody who spoke on chemtrails named Steve Murillo. You know, he was also, I can tell you, I mean, I'd have to look at the booklet to tell you his stats, but he was in the Navy and the Marine Corps and has a lot of experience as a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying he doesn't know what he's talking about. All I did was get the secondhand account of his talk because I couldn't go because I was too busy. But no mention of orgone.
None.
And
No
if you're
mention of
talking
any
about
solutions.
chemtrails again and again, this talking about chemtrails with no talk about orgone, if it's not solution oriented, then it's just fear.
It's fear porn.
It's just fear.
Yeah. And at least in our experiences, it seems like the pilots know the least of anyone, which is kind of bizarre because you would expect them to know more than just the layperson.
Hey, just because they know how to fly a plane doesn't mean they understand atmospheric science.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know there's probably some stuff they have to learn, but it's not going to go the distance because they're just going to learn what they have to know to fly the plane. One of the people who came to our booth was upset because she put something about chemtrails on her Facebook page. This is a very common story. Upset because she put it out there and got terribly debunked by her pilot friend. And she was pretty upset and embarrassed about it. And I told her, there's no need to be embarrassed about it. Your pilot friend is wrong. You're right.
Mm-hmm. But because they have that title, pilot, sometimes we just assume that they know what they're talking about, and we abandon all critical thinking at that point. And that's exactly the opposite of what we need to do.
All right, so I have to do this again. Chemtrails 101. A chemtrail forms over 30,000 feet. A contrail forms over 30,000 feet. A chemtrail forms at any altitude.
Mm-hmm.
Contrails over 30,000 feet because it's cold and the ice crystals freeze and it's very short, like your breath on a cold day or exhaust from your car. 30,000 feet.
Do we even have contrails anymore, though? We have different plane
because of the high
now.
bypass turbofan engine. We don't really have contrails anymore. But if we were to have contrails, they would occur at over 30,000 feet. And they don't stick horizon to horizon. And pilots have these silly reasons for different amounts of humidity in the atmosphere in different places.
When atmospheric conditions are right. Yeah.
When atmospheric conditions are deadly orgone radiation and positive ions, the chemtrails stick. When atmospheric conditions are healthy negative ions and orgone energy, no matter how hard they try to spray a chemtrail, it will break apart. Mm-hmm. As we saw over and over again in Joshua Tree, and kept pointing out.
We saw it in action all the time, and it was so nice to just be talking to people. And I peek out under our canopy and I see the swirling masses in the skies, and so I just step out and like, hey guys, Exhibit A, check it out. It was fun to just kind of present it in real live time, and a lot of people really got it. That was good.
The real time helps. So I got to ask though, is the orgone energy being covered up even in this form of contact in the desert? Is it indeed a part of the controlled opposition? That's what I'm asking. What do you think?
I think so. I'm inclined to think so because, and again, it was very frustrating not to be able to go to these talks because we had to man our booth.
Well, I saw a few. I saw David Wilcock. I saw Jim Mars and Laura Eisenhower. We saw the panel with Graham Hancock and Laura. And we saw some pretty cool stuff, but not enough.
But nobody's talking about orgone energy.
No, not one.
And you have to just, maybe it's, I don't know, it's very difficult to talk about because I acknowledge that we've been far more engrossed in orgone energy and all related topics for the past 2 years, more so than almost anyone anywhere.
Yeah.
So perhaps we have a little bit of a biased view and saying, how can they not know about this? But seriously, these are people that are talking about fifth, sixth, seventh dimension. Just they're going way off into outer space, no pun intended. How do they not talk about this
The life energy,
this liberating energy, and how obvious it is that
obvious
it's
to us.
that it well, if you do a little bit of research, it
Yeah.
becomes obvious, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, all I had to look up was how to stop chemtrails on YouTube like 3 years ago, and I got the answer. Of course, it took a lot of research from there to really, understand and believe that it worked, and I had to do my own experimentation to really understand it. But one of the other crazy things though that happened at Contact was the Saturday psychic attacks.
Oh yeah. It seemed to be across the board. It just happened to
Everyone
everyone.
was losing their mind on Saturday. I mean, I heard about meltdowns and other things unrelated to us, and I thought I was, losing it because I was under heat exhaustion and getting bombarded. They bombarded us with deadly energy on Saturday. That was the big chemtrail day, the day they sprayed chemtrails only over Contact in the
Right
desert.
over, nowhere else.
Yeah.
Just right over us.
So we were kind of bombarded, but we were working to transmute it, and by the end of the day, we had transmuted it and cleaned it out of the sky. I've got a picture of this on my blog. You'll see a beautiful sunset with swirly chemtrail clouds. They are spiraling into oblivion as the scalar wave vortex throws them into space. So it's a very nice picture. So take a look at thekembo.tumblr.com for a few pictures from Joshua Tree. Because of my contact with the salad, I missed a couple of days of posting because I was pretty sick. But other than that, you'll see some cool pictures.
So they should have named it Contact with the Salad in the Desert.
Exactly. Well, that was my experience out there. I didn't see any UFOs or aliens. But I saw lots of couples, baby boomer couples with shirts that said humans aren't real. So
Boomers.
well, okay.
Okay, maybe I shouldn't talk disparagingly
I know
about boomers.
so many boomers listen to our show, and,
Yes.
and actually,
Hi boomers.
Hi boomers, and we love that you come from a generation that wants to know more. I mean, I'll leave my parents and Gabe's parents out of the equation.
Thank you.
But
Thank
other
you.
than them, I think that
You'd be doing a tragic injustice if you lump them in.
a lot of people of that generation came out of the hippie movement, and they do want to know.
And the New Age movement, or as we like to call it, the New Cage movement.
Yes, the pharmaceutical industry of consciousness.
Yeah. Well, it's not too hard to see why we call it that.
Well, okay, you're left on the hamster wheel. A lot of these, a lot of New Age speakers and healers. Not all of them are for real. Some of them are really legitimately wanting to know more and help people. But so much of the New Age movement is just to keep you just knowing enough, but in the fear matrix, so you keep coming back. Keep coming back. It's the pharmaceutical industry of consciousness.
Mm-hmm. If they have orgone energy, they're happy, and they don't need to come to things like Contact in the Desert because they know stuff. They don't need to just be fed the same stuff over and over again, reinforcing mentality that's keeping them down low and not aware of the higher states, which is kind of why I was not terribly surprised that Laura was getting so attacked.
Yeah, I could tell. I could tell when someone's being attacked. Many people were being attacked on Saturday. She was too, just like everyone. And she did an excellent talk. I was glad to get away for it for a while, but I noticed that she would be more agitated in her speech when speaking about archons. And I wish that people would stop calling them that, but that's what they call themselves.
In fact, let me make an official disclaimer. Stop calling them archons.
Try making up something funny, like Cameron Day calls them ankle biters. And our good friend John Graff, who is a great photographer, has contributed a lot to our work. He calls them ass corns. I hope he's listening right now.
Well, that stemmed from the fact that we originally called them Acrons.
I called them Acrons.
But we didn't want to offend anyone from that part of Ohio. So
right. And Devo comes from Akron, and they're a great band.
That's right. And they have great hats.
Exactly. So we don't want to insult any earthlings, but it's okay to insult the Ascorns because here's the thing. We're being hidden from our true power. Okay. And this is what Laura Eisenhower talked about. And what was really nice listening to her talk was she would get very happy after she got agitated. I could see it. It was emotions because she's affected by the presence of these dark entities. So when she spoke of them, you could see the emotion because she has firsthand experience with dealing with them. And I know what that's like because I do too. Gabriel and I both have psychic attacks against us as we do our work, and Wilhelm Reich did too.
Including a big one right before we left for
Yeah,
contact.
we were almost stopped from going. Something crazy happened. Shall I tell it?
You,
It's
it's up
not
to
worth
you.
it, is
I
it?
don't think it
Let's not
is.
give them the gravitas.
That's right.
But anyway, what I would see with Laura's talk is when she would talk about the light and humorous things, if then she would be really light. You could see the energy shift. So she's so affected because she lives it. And so many people are just talking about it. And that's why I say some of the talk is in a 3D context.
Mm-hmm.
With Laura, she lives it. So
and I feel like Jim Mars is also kind of the opposite of that very basic 3D approach too.
He's very complex on a 3D level. See, what's great about Jim is he could talk to everybody because on the 3D level, he's got the facts and figures to back everything up. But he also can go into higher levels. I was fortunate to catch his talk on remote viewing. Our US government actually used remote viewers to see what the enemy was doing. So he was able to discuss remote viewing with personal experience because he's done it. So Jim is on a pretty high level too, and he understands the orgone because he has the chem buster and he has our tower busters, which I love. He called them energy disruptors. Anyway, so there was a lot of weird psychic attacks going on, and Holly Cook, who is a great healer, she and I did a prayer for Laura, and it just like I could see the difference with. Then the discussion turned to the light even more, so it was good.
That's very interesting how that happened.
Yeah.
Because you can see it sometimes when someone is there's no acting. It's just they talk about something and it hits so close to home that they're not even in control. It's just like an involuntary reaction. Like they'll be visibly agitated, and then it's all about prayers and intentions to help people out. And everyone, that's the funny thing. Saturday was just so frenetic, and then Sunday, just everyone started helping each other again.
Yes.
And the sky was clear once again.
Yep.
And it ended on a far better note.
It certainly did. We were able to diffuse the dark energy. Oh, and this is what I was talking about before I went on a tangent about Laura and Jim being great speakers. The power that we have within us is what's being covered up more than anything. And the reason people are going to contact in the desert is they want to increase their consciousness, and they understand that there are other entities out there that are interacting with us and may have some part in our increase of consciousness. Likewise, they have a part in holding down our consciousness. I think what we want to know more is which ETs are involved with us. Now, Laurie McDonald should have been a speaker. I think she's going to be speaking next year. She is an absolute genius. She can actually talk of the different types of ETs, but she has this knowledge of how they've really infiltrated our human life with genetic experiments where they abduct humans and, they'll abduct women and impregnate them with alien DNA. And so there are these hybrid babies. So I've heard her speak about this, and it's disturbing and fascinating. We really want to know more. We want to know what's going on, what the intervention here. And then there are other people talking about beneficial ETs that are helping us. One of the issues I have with that is that people want those ETs to do it for us.
Yep.
So
just like they want us to end the chemtrails for them, and they don't want to do any actual work. And I'm just going to sit here and can you please make the chemtrails stop? And I don't want to ever see them again. And can you please hurry up with that? And can you do it for free too?
Yeah, it's Truthburger. Truthburger once again. They want the truth now and fast. And can you do it for me? That was a.
Hey, can you please hurry up a little?
That was a Kate of Gaia quote there. But anyway, we are immensely powerful, and we don't need to take any BS from these ETs. They don't have the depth that we do. They don't have the emotional depth. They're insanely jealous of us. I'm talking about the bad ones right now because I've never met the good ones.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
We only do battle with the bad ones, and the good ones are, I don't know. Maybe they're just chowing down on popcorn and watching in the wings.
I
But
think they're enjoying the show,
yeah,
but I'm not going to talk down about them because maybe they're helping. I don't know. All I know is this: I've only had contact with the bad ones, and once we realize our power and we realize simple solutions, they lose their power. It's so much on the etheric level. My interaction with them has been completely on above the 3D plane. It's been all completely on the etheric plane. And the way that they work with me and Gabe is they hit us with deadly energy and mind control frequencies, especially when we have a major project to do. They'll take like a week and really bombard us. Like the week of the geoengineering summit, it was called the what was the chemtrails meeting in Canada called? I can't even remember. The Global Chemtrails Conference.
what difference
I
does it
know, who
make?
cares, right? Just it's more of the same. But during that week, they were bombarding us. And what happens during those times is they also mind control other individuals. Mind control is very easy for them. We've lived under a mind control frequency fence for a very long time, even before the days of cell phone towers and HARP. But now that we are more advanced technologically as humans, not living, in the dark ages anymore, they're able to introduce more and more technology because we're ready to see it.
That's all the wireless is just mind control technologies. And I also want to add that everyone is mind controlled,
Yes, everyone,
including us.
including us.
It's just the only difference is how each individual person deals with it, how they defend against it, how they acknowledge it, and don't just immediately go to the dark side, because it's the easiest thing in the world to do what's wrong. The wrong thing is it's ostensibly effortless, but to do the right thing and to do it time and time again and to recognize when you're being led down the wrong path is so incredibly difficult. And I'm speaking from my own personal experience that you fail time and time again, but that's okay because you just pick yourself back up, dust yourself off, or in the case of contact in the desert, take a shower because there's so much damn dust. But you just proceed anyway. You do your best and you don't worry. And it's going to happen again and again and again, but it's all in how you deal with it.
Mm-hmm. From the Buddhist perspective, there are different realms of existence in samsara. We live in samsara. Samsara is the cycle of death and rebirth, and included in this cycle is endless suffering. No matter how high your rebirth, no matter how rich and comfortable you are, you're going to suffer in this realm of existence. You're going to suffer some kind of suffering, be it emotional or mental or physical. In the realm of samsara, the lowest realm is hell. And in hell, there are countless billions more than there are in all the other realms put together. Because, as Gabe said, it's easy to do the wrong thing. And it's very easy to end up in hell. Now, that is if you are from a Buddhist context, everyone has their own ideas. But as a metaphor, I believe in this model. I think this is a very good metaphor. I don't believe that hell is a place. I believe it's a state of mind. The Buddhists also say that everything in your reality is created by your mind. This is absolutely 100% true.
And that's been scientifically proven too.
And I could even prove it right here.
It's not just a bunch of woo-woo new age nonsense.
No, I could prove it right here. I'm looking at the same microphone as Gabriel is looking at, and I see it differently than he does. I could look at anything. I'm looking at the same forest as the other people who live in this community. They're seeing it from a different angle, and they're seeing it through a different filter. So it's the same forest, or is it? And if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, it doesn't make a sound. And what is the sound of one hand clapping? Anyway, the fact of the matter is, it's easier to be in hell than any other realm. The next realm up from hell is the world of the hungry ghosts. Now, in the world of hell, I don't have to tell you, that's just brimfire and
brimstone, brimfire.
Yeah. Anyway, you know what I mean. It's pretty bad. It's a pretty bad place. You've got Hitler and Saddam Hussein and
Stalin,
yeah,
Gandhi, all those guys.
all those people. Anyway, for the realm up from hell is the world of the hungry ghosts, and in the world of hungry ghosts, you have immense hunger and thirst, and it's really, really sad place. The people there will wander and wander trying to find a speck of food to feed their children. I cry about the hungry ghosts. They make me so sad. That I must have been one because I really understand that suffering. And you must understand suffering, not that you must suffer, but you must understand the
Yeah,
suffering of others and
that's
have
something
compassion.
that the New Age movement, to go back to that concept, they have a very hard time understanding that you must know suffering. You must be aware of it. It does exist. You can't just
It's
be
not all
the
love and
be the
light.
ostrich with your head in the sand. Yeah, the whole love and light thing. Oh God, it just
It's uh, it's
makes me
not.
sick
Yeah,
sometimes.
me too. Because you have to understand. So the next realm up from the hungry ghosts is the animal realm, and the animals don't have it nearly as badly as those lower realms, but they do live in constant fear, and fear is the reason for our suffering. So the animals are literally living in constant fear and with a survival instinct. A house pet is a very well cared for animal, but they still have that suffering of ignorance. They cannot attain a higher state through meditation. They don't understand it. I mean, my cat seemed to meditate, and I hope he was, and I think he'll come back as a human. But in general, the animals, they don't really have that ability. And then the human realm is the most fortunate of all realms because this world, we have the knowledge and the power to attain higher states of being. We can train our minds. We can gain control of our minds because, as Laurie McDonald said in her talk that we were listening to, the if you don't control your own mind, someone else will do it for you.
Hmm.
So we have the ability to do that as humans.
And they will always do it, and your best interests will not be in mind. So it makes that all the more imperative that you do learn to control your own mind and make your own decisions, because someone else doing it for you, they're going to do what suits them, and that may not necessarily be what suits you.
Right. And so in general, the mind control going on just keeps you working 9 to 5, keeps you in that television mind control Facebook matrix and keeps you in the banks and all of that.
Hmm.
Keeps you in debt as a debt slave. So that's the mind control you're going to experience, as well as the psychic attacks if you dare think differently and you're not prepared to defend yourself. But the human
And the
realm,
fear of thinking
oh,
differently
yes.
is huge.
The human realm is the most fortunate of realms because we are cognizant enough to achieve higher states of being. We just need to apply ourselves. Most people won't do this, and most people will fall to lower realms. This is, according to the Buddhists, I believe this is a good model because I think no matter what your school of thought, if you understand that reality is created by the mind, this is a good model to think about it. So we are very fortunate as human beings because we have just enough suffering to know we need to do better. But we have, we if we're born in the United States or a supposed first world country with housing and food and water and able to clean ourselves and able to relax at the end of the day despite our difficulties, we're in that really fortunate position as humans to have the time and the leisure to meditate and achieve higher states. Above humans come the demigods, and then above them come the gods. The demigods and the gods are constantly at war because the demigods are furiously jealous of the gods for their state of, a high state of being. But the gods live in such a state of bliss and they live for eons. They can live for 100,000 years. They are just sitting around eating grapes and playing guitar, and having sex. They're just having a good time
In
up
that
there.
order?
That's what they do. They party. They just have like chill out, sessions, and they don't have any desire to attain higher states because everything's all good up there. So we're fortunate not to be gods because the gods will certainly fall to lower realms once they've burned out their karma and the karma burns out.
That's interesting because in the Sumerian texts, the word Nephilim means those who are cast down.
Absolutely.
So perhaps that ties into it too. And I'll talk more about the Nephilim later on in the show. But that's a very interesting that you mentioned that the being cast down or falling from higher realms. That's a very interesting concept, I think.
Definitely. Well, I think many cultures across the world have those views. And if this goes back to the collective unconscious. The Hero with a Thousand Faces was a Joseph Campbell book I read back in high school about the collective unconscious. We have the same myths around the world. And this is because it's coming to us from, he believed, a collective unconscious, and maybe it's even coming from an alien source. So we don't know.
We don't, but what we do know is we cannot trust the words of government people, military people, anyone in those fields. We have to take what they say with a grain of salt. And I think the general feeling at Contact in the Desert was, at least the people who came up to us, was that we're maybe not being told everything here.
Yeah, not even a contact. I mean, come on. I don't really trust just anything I hear. But it was a good experience.
It
And it was
was.
interesting.
And we had a lot of cool people come up to us. We had several fans.
Yeah.
It was very interesting, and maybe now's a good time to give a couple shout outs. We had basically our biggest fan of the radio show. His name is Will Quinn. Wanted to give a shout out to him.
Thank you, Will.
He came up to us, and he bought us lunch one of the days, not the salad that you
No,
had
he bought me
contact
a veggie burger that was very nourishing and did not harm me.
Yes. And he got some Tower Busters from us, and he should be well off with those. And we also wanted to thank Holly Cook again. She's a good friend of ours.
Yeah.
And,
thanks for the shower.
yeah.
And for being you.
Yes, in that order. Also wanted to give a shout out to, we had like 3 Gabriels that day. It was very interesting.
It was interesting. I saw my old friend Lino from background work, and Lino and her new partner Gabriel came up to see us, and it was really cool to see her again. She and I talked all about conspiracies back when we were extras on set. She and I played a lesbian couple getting married. That's how I met her. Yeah, because she was shaved bald and I had short hair. So Hollywood says, oh, they must be lesbians. But we became good friends on set. And we stood in line at City Hall to promote gay marriage on television, because television likes to promote gay marriage. And I got no problem with that. But if 2 gay people want to merge their 2 business entities together, that's their right.
Well, as per usual, TV is taking something that no normal person would have a problem with and just perverting it and twisting it and distorting it beyond all usefulness for their own nefarious agendas. So anyway, well, we can talk more about that in another episode.
And Gabriel number 2.
Yes, Gabriel Tegan from Colorado. He apparently saw you, Sharon, on Fade to Black, or heard you rather. It was audio only on Fade to Black from last year
with Jimmy Church.
Yep.
Who I also got to meet again. I hadn't seen him in a year.
And we wanted to thank him for following the correct orgonite recipe and making it properly, and doing all of the great work that we do out here, but he's doing it out there in Colorado. And it makes sense that other people from Colorado would contact us saying, oh my God, it's terrible out here, because as usual, they don't know what they're talking about.
Well, people need to learn how to understand these changing skies. That's a big one that I was trying to teach people in real time at Joshua Tree. I was pointing at the sky saying, look, don't be scared of that chemtrail. That chemtrail is breaking into pieces.
Mm-hmm.
They have to learn how to see the new skies. Don't be scared of that cloud. That spiraling cloud is the cleanup of geoengineering.
Well, once you pointed it out, I think they got it. So
anyway, thanks, Gabriel, for making beautiful functional orgonite in Colorado.
Thanks to Gabriel. You mentioned Nurse Susan.
Thank you, Nurse Susan, for resurrecting me from the dead.
And to our neighbor, Sean.
Sean, thank you for teaching me what a SIM card was and how to use an iPhone. Bless you.
And his father, Mark, for buying a gigantic rose quartz pyramid.
And for letting us use your Wi-Fi hotspot.
Yes, that was very useful, because the Joshua Tree Resort Center just kind of dropped the ball on the whole Wi-Fi thing.
And our phone wasn't activated yet because I didn't know how to do it. So Sean explained all that to me.
Thank you to Serena Wright-Taylor of the Conscious Life Expo. Wanted to thank her for another iPhone related.
Yeah, thank you, Serena. Bless you for teaching me how to close programs on the iPhone.
Hey, someone's got to do it. Thank you to John and Dot of Granada Hills, and to Stormy.
Thank you, John and Dot, for the beautiful chakra candle, and Stormy for helping us not have our tent fly away on day 1. And thank you to John, Dot, and Stormy, all of you, for enduring my tirade after Gabriel threw out my soap on Sunday night.
God. Sorry, I just it spilled in my bag, and I got all pissed off. And
you were, you did realize we were in the desert. And
yes,
that I needed to shower. And thank you, Stormy. Thank you, Stormy, for explaining that I could use shampoo for that.
Well, our last shout out goes to Brian Besko of Twisted Sage Studios in South Dakota, and we're going to talk more about this in hour 2. We're coming to the end of hour 1, but wanted to give a shout out to him, and we're going to talk about what he does and his products when we come back.
Yeah.
But
Brian Besko makes these amazing tensor rings. So there's a lot to get into there. These things, I mean, they're made of copper. They produce energy similar to orgone. Unbelievable stuff. So we're going to get more into that. And we're going to need to get Brian on the show to explain it because it's really complicated science.
We're definitely going to do that. And, you know, we've had Ken roll on twice, so we love science here. We got to have the scientific explanation too, as well as the spiritual element. And I think Brian is versed enough in both of those that we can get some really good information, and we have some of his products, so we'll explain more about that in hour 2. But anyhow, you can go to our website, which is thechembo.com, and find out about all the other stuff that we're doing. Again, the weather war is being fought in real time in California, and we've got lots of photos of that on our blog. On our website, again, there's links to our Etsy store, events we are doing, and a photo gallery where you can find out just what's going on in the sky and not just be freaked out automatically, but you can understand what's going on, our changing skies, and see the ways that Sharon and I and many other people all over the world are fighting back and reclaiming our consciousness.
I urge you to go to the Orgonite tab on my website, thechembo.com, because on there I put a bunch of pictures and I explain at each one what's happening. There's so much of misinformation, and I'm not saying disinformation, I'm saying misinformation. People just don't know what they're seeing up there. They see anything that doesn't look like a puffy cloud or a blue sky, and they say, they're doing this to us. So take a look at it, because I have a bunch of pictures of the geoengineering, you know, before Orgonite. This is what it looks like without. And I explain what's happening there. Then I've got a bunch of pictures with Orgonite showing what's happening there. Twisting chemtrails, breaking trails, funnel clouds, transmutations, the removal of toxins. So there is a lot to learn, as well as the chembo.tumblr.com, which has great real-time coverage of the weather war, except for the 2 days where I was sick. But those days were pretty much the same as the days before. So sometimes I'll skip a day. I'm actually taking records every day, whether I post or not, and compiling several years. My goal is at least 10 years of data.
Mm-hmm. And you can also find a link to our YouTube channel, which is up and running now. We don't have a URL for that just yet, but through our website, you can find a link for that. And thank you for pointing out the difference between misinformation and disinformation, because disinformation has the intention of spreading untruths, but misinformation is just, you don't know what you're talking about. And there are unfortunately a lot of people that come from that camp, and that's where we come in, is that we just seek to help inform people and tell them what's really going on in the skies and in their own hearts.
Yeah, so check the media tab on our website to get links to our archives for the radio show, and also interviews I've done. It's pretty soon an episode of Buzzsaw with Sean Stone will air, where I'm talking about the ET connection. So that's going to have some new information for everybody. I guess I talked about it today. Every interview I do, I talk about it a little differently. So that should be interesting. And Sean also really gets it. He understands the topic. And one more thing coming up, I have a talk on June 18th at Longevity Pure Medicine in Los Angeles. Go to our website, thechembo.com, for more information. Dean Ryan will also be speaking. The seminar is called Odyssey of Truth. So that should be a lot of fun. There will be entertainment, some wine and vegetarian snacks.
And hopefully no salads, no tainted salads.
Well, I think it takes place in Bel Air, so I don't think we have to worry about any of that.
I hope not. Anyhow, you have been listening to The Human Frequency on American Freedom Radio. We will be back in hour 2. Thank you for listening. You can check out all of our stuff on our website, thechembo.com. Thank you, and we'll see you in hour 2.
No taboo topics. No fear of doom. No fear of doom. We are American Freedom Radio. American Freedom Radio.
Welcome back to the Human Frequency on American Freedom Radio. I just wanted to put out a quick word for Mitch Santel. We hope you feel better soon. Mitch Santel of American Freedom Radio has got quite a bug, and there's been some crazy biowarfare bugs going around. I feel like he got one of those.
And I feel like you got one of them too.
I did too. Well, Mitch, I hope you feel better, and maybe you want to try some MMS, Miracle Mineral Solution. This is not an advertisement. MMS is almost free. It would put the pharmaceutical industry out of business if this got out.
Warning, these segments have not been evaluated by the FDA.
Well, yeah, and as soon as the FDA approves it, they're going to see something terrible to it.
But as soon as they approve it, to stay the hell away from it.
Well, I got a bug at contact, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. I thought it was just heat exhaustion. By 24 hours into it, I realized this is probably more than heat exhaustion. And I hadn't taken the MMS. So I started using that.
Yeah, we didn't bring it with us on the trip. And also, you didn't match any of the symptoms of heat stroke or dehydration or any of that stuff. You drink a ton of water in the first place, but you were drinking, I don't know, something like a gallon of water a day.
Well, I got some bizarre bug. I think I got it from the salad, and it lasted for, I finally got over it today. But that's actually pretty good. Mm-hmm. That's why I really urge everybody to try it. If you're having health problems, if you're having bacterial infection and the doctor wants to put you on antibiotics, I would say first try MMS because it's way faster and way more effective and safer on your body. It doesn't kill all the beneficial bacteria in your colon. And it's actually, MMS means Miracle Mineral Solution, but it's actually chlorine dioxide solution. And we've talked about this before. It's a combination of two different liquids. One of them is sodium chlorite with a T, and the other citric acid. You literally just take like 3 drops of each from a little dripper bottle and mix them together, let them sit for 20 seconds, mix them with water, and drink. This is what's used to purify water. This is the chlorine that they use to purify water. You can drink it. It's not just straight chlorine. It's chlorine dioxide solution, which is safe to drink. So anyway, I used it. I feel better. And this actually was the second time we came back from an event recently where I was very sick. Mm-hmm. Now, the first time recently was very bizarre. We were at the New Earth Expo at the end of May, and we were sitting at our booth. And fortunately, at both this event and the last one, the sickness came in the very end. So I was able to get through all the event until the sickness started.
Right.
At the New Earth Expo in Van Nuys, we were at our table, and then this strange sulfurous smell started filling the room, and it was very unpleasant. And everyone noticed it. And then the next thing...
Well, how could you not notice something like that?
Yeah, it was pretty putrid.
It smells like rotten eggs.
It was putrid. But, okay, fine, bad smell. The next thing I know, there's a smell, some kind of like, fake scent, some kind of perfume filling the air. I didn't see it happen, but Gabe saw it happen.
Well, I was, at the time, you had left the booth. I turned around to, I don't know, like make an adjustment on the table or talk to someone. I don't remember what. But when I looked up, I saw one of the Hare Krishna people who had a booth, a couple of booths down from us. This one girl had just walked by and was just like indiscriminately spraying in arbitrary places from what looked like just this little brown squirt bottle. Just like I said, just arbitrarily spraying here, walking a few paces, spraying there. And I caught it like right at the end, and she'd stopped and then walked back to the table. But by then the damage had already been done. And I think the woman across from us was also complaining about it too. She didn't care for it.
Yeah, she was complaining, and I was complaining because I'm allergic to smells. And I said, "Oh, great! Now someone sprayed an artificial fragrance. I'm going to get a sore throat, and my nose is going to hurt." And
you were the only two that were vocal about it.
Yeah, so I was very vocal.
Imagine everyone else who didn't like it, but they just weren't saying anything about it.
Well, I was vocal about it to the point where our friend told me I was complaining, and I'm like, "Well, okay, fine, I'm complaining." So I went and opened the doors and tried to air the place out. I came back, but within 20 minutes, I was quite ill. And I thought it was just an allergic reaction, but it got worse and worse. My throat was inflamed. The glands in my throat were on fire. You touched my throat gently, to heal me, and I just recoiled. It was awful. And fortunately that happened at the end of the event and we drove home, but I never felt throat pain like this before. And I've had throat issues in my life, as you know. Mm-hmm. This was like a new thing, new symptoms. And I thought to myself, I think that this is one of those biowarfare bugs, those GMO viruses that Ken Rolla talks about.
Because he gets them all the time. He's traveling obviously a lot more than we are, but he gets them constantly.
Well, I felt that we were sprayed with a biowarfare agent. So, I cannot prove it, except I came home extremely ill with symptoms I'd never experienced before.
And you were fine up until that point.
Until she sprayed that stuff.
You didn't need anything at that event. It couldn't really have logically been anything else.
And they seem so brainwashed. I mean, it's so easy to mind control cult members. Mm-hmm. And anyway, that's what a cult is. It's people who don't want to think for themselves. And religions often act as cults.
And didn't we just mention in hour 1 that if you don't control your mind, someone else will do it for you?
Right. So I just want to say again, I came home and the symptoms I had sounded similar to Mitch Santel's. So I was kind of communicating with him a little bit about it, and I let him know about MMS, and I hope he has a chance to try it. You can actually buy it on eBay. It costs next to nothing.
It's ludicrously cheap.
It is. It's ridiculously cheap. Anyway, it would cure so much disease in the world. This is what third world countries need for illness, but we don't send that. We send vaccines.
Yep.
To make everybody sick and infertile. But anyway, I came home, tried the MMS. I was 90% better by the next morning. Amazingly, and I did my nap in the afternoon, which I do when I'm sick. I kept taking doses of MMS periodically. By day 2, I was completely 100%. So that's what I did. There's definitely these biowarfare agents going around, and it's no surprise they would hit an event like the New Earth Expo.
Mm-hmm. And contact in the desert too.
If that was a biowarfare bug and not just a salad that had been left out in the heat.
Well, regardless of the source, the difference this time was that we were already under heavy bombardment from extreme heat and just very bad conditions in general. We were camping there. It was very uncomfortable ground. It was very hot. We didn't really get to really relax at any point on that trip.
Not really. And I got to say it again. The vendors were treated like, poop on the bottom of your shoe. Okay. It was the worst. I remember I came into one event, to one of the halls, the one when I was suffering from heat exhaustion, and went to Dr. Susan. I wanted to get in there, and the man at the door said, "Where's your pass?" And I said, "I'm a vendor. They didn't give us passes. They didn't even say hi to us. They didn't even check us in. I don't have a pass." He goes, "Well, vendors aren't allowed in this event." And I said, "I'm going to drop dead from heat exhaustion. I got to go in there." And he let me in. But I mean, come on. Vendors aren't allowed in this event. We should be allowed in every event. We paid as much as the other people.
Well, they are actually allowed. That was the stipulation in the contract, that the vendors get the passes to all of the talks. But the guy was obviously just being a schmuck, as my grandpa would say.
Well, anyway, he let me in because I was going to drop dead. So I mean, you kind of got to let a person in. Anyway, whatever. I could go on and on about.
Very persuasive.
Well, I mean, I was kind of a mess. I don't know how persuasive I was. Mm-hmm. But anyway, one of the really, really cool things, though, I want to get into the Tensor rings because, Brian Besco makes this product and they're unbelievable. They do similar things to what our orgonite does, but they're a little more specific.
TwistedSage.com.
It's TwistedSage.com. I first learned about him from Dwayne Gardner, who is known as Orgonite Austin on YouTube. And he mentions this in his book, The Science of Rain, where he gets into all these different technologies that are great for, getting rid of pollution. He never really talks about chemtrails specifically, but that's what he means. Ending the geoengineering, neutralizing EMF, and bringing rain. So it's about human health and it's about the health of the atmosphere. So I read this in The Science of Rain. I still don't totally understand it. So I'm going to read a little bit from his brochure on tensor rings just so you know what it is. Now, within a tensor ring is an infinite source of energy that is neither electric nor magnetic, with an output that is beneficial and healing to all life forms. It is a superconductor that neutralizes magnetic fields, brings coherency to chaos, and easily stabilizes and equalizes the biomagnetic and energy fields of the body. The tensor field produces a measurable gravitational effect. Tensor technology is noted for its use in healing, pollution abatement, energizing and restructuring water, enhancing plant growth and vitality, beekeeping practices, amongst thousands of other observations, including connectivity to the spiritual realms. Tensor fields are science-based, though go far beyond the current scope and reality of most sciences. Tensor rings are truly an integration of scientific and spiritual technologies.
I really like that last part. I like the whole thing, of course, but we talk so much on this show about how everything is a blend of science and spirituality. And of course, Greg Braden talks about this ad nauseum in all of his talks, and he is responsible for a lot of that blend that exists today in many different fields, especially the type that you'll find at events like Contact in the Desert. But it's so important to have that middle ground of both, because so many people think it's just one or the other. Either you're just immersed in charts and graphs and equations that nobody in their right mind can understand, or you've got this crazy smile on your face and your eyes are all glazed over and you're just in hippy dippy land mumbling stuff about love and light. And there is a happy medium here. Reich called it functionalism.
Functionalism.
Yes. And it's a blend of those two. And you have to have that happy medium, that middle ground, to truly understand so many of these concepts that help us ascend to higher dimensions of consciousness.
Well, Reich called the scientific only approach, that was the mechanistic way of thinking, whereas the spiritual only approach was the mystical way of thinking, both of which are missing a lot of the story. We've got to merge them. So I really love these tensor rings, and actually, this was first discovered by Slim Sperling.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know a ton about Slim Sperling, but he was the first one to study how the tensor ring works. And let's see, I could read a little about Slim here. So Slim Sperling rediscovered tensor ring technology in 91. Slim knew of John Wheeler's extensive work with closed loops. John Archibald Wheeler, who coined the term black hole, came up with a mathematical theory of the tensor field, which is found inside the ring. Wheeler called the field created by the loop a tensor field. Hans Becker, an astrophysicist who extensively tested the Sperling rings, found the ring to oscillate at 144 megahertz, a harmonic of the speed of light. He said that when you create a closed-loop coil, energy begins to flow and the laws of physics go out the window. They may be the simplest, most efficient source of energy there is, gathering and condensing it freely from space. This is just like orgone energy.
It is.
And that's why people keep telling me to study on Slim Sperling's work. He did this great thing where he directed energy at a storm that was coming, and the weather report said there was going to be a terrible storm coming in.
It was imminent. Yeah.
Right. And he directed energy at the storm while using his tractor in the field. Every time he went northward with his tractor, he directed energy, and he made the storm not happen.
After only, I think I read the website, only after about 8 or 10 times, 8 or 10 passes on the tractor.
So that was a great example of the connection between us and our atmosphere, which we've discovered through using orgone, and so did Wilhelm Reich.
It's kind of like doing a rain dance, but on a tractor.
Exactly. Well, it's interesting because I used to go jogging around the neighborhood in Hollywood, and while jogging, sometimes I would do a prayer with every step. You know, I was creating rings of energy around the neighborhood because I would do a big circle, a big loop, and with every step, I was pounding the earth to bring rain to California, bring rain to California. And with every step and every breath, that's what I did during these jogs.
You just got it stronger and stronger.
Yeah, and then it rained.
Stronger.
It rained. So you put your intention in there, especially with physical activity, which may be something like what yoga is, where you're combining movement and breath. And here we're combining movement and breath and intention and affecting the world around us. So these tensor rings are hard for me to understand, so I'm just going to read one last bit because we're going to have Brian Besko come back and join us and explain in depth how these work. But here is the short story. So how does it work? When copper is heated and drawn to create the wire, the crystalline structure within the wire is aligned in a one-way piezoelectric flow. The wire is folded and twisted so the ends come back together on themselves. This creates a continuous flow of energy in both directions. Precise measurements, known as qubits, act as antennas. Tensor rings are basically piezoelectric powered antennae. Various qubits are found in the alignment and construction of sacred sites all over the globe, yet only 8 qubits are known to create tensor fields.
That's fascinating. And of course, we work with copper in all of our orgonite pieces, and it's technically not essential, but we find that it's very effective to put copper coils and make them into little antennas, or the SBB coil pattern to lay flat in our pyramids. But
Yeah.
copper is very interesting, and to have it being used in this fashion just adds another dimension to it, because it's not just negative ions being repelled, but apparently it's something else. And I'm glad that he mentions the piezoelectric element, because again, that's another element of it. And people like Don Croft, who deny the piezoelectric element in
He'll
orgone
come
energy.
around. He's got to come around.
Well, it's not true. It's such a big part of it, and it's not just the crystals where it is. Apparently it's the copper too. And I would love to hear Brian's explanation of that and other things. It's again, it's like you mentioned, it's orgone energy, but it's just harnessing it and applying it differently than we do.
Well, it's more specific. It's specific harmonics of energy. And it's very nice to know that when we put a copper coil in our pieces, that we're not just creating a little antenna to repel negative ions, like you said, that this is actually also part of the piezoelectric effect. So the quartz crystals are getting squeezed by resin, activating piezoelectric properties. The copper coil is a string of crystals. It really brings a new dimension to the work. And Brian, by the way, really understood the orgonite.
Yeah. He quizzed you, didn't he?
He did. What he asked me was, he said, so people are saying that it blocks EMF. And I said, well, that would be incorrect. It doesn't block EMF. It restructures it. And he said, yeah, that's right. Because it doesn't block EMF. It just changes the structure of it. It takes a chaotic waveform and turns it into coherent parallel lines that pass through you more quietly. So that's what that's about. And I visited Brian, and I tried his what did he call it? An ascension chamber?
Yeah, it's a big, like 10-foot tall. I don't know. It seemed even taller than that.
It was big.
Just like this big. I call it the hyperbaric chamber. I didn't know what else to call it, and I was just kind of being humorous. And I was completely dehydrated, and my brain had turned to a frothy goo at that point. So I just called it whatever. But no, we both stood in it and listened to this 4-minute, 44-second meditation via a pair of headphones, and it was very, very relaxing.
It was
a very, very interesting experience to be in that. Just a series of those
large tensor rings.
Very large tensor rings, like maybe, I don't know, 2 feet or so in diameter, that you could just stand in this chamber. I felt like it was a little bit kind of like what an orgone accumulator might have felt like, except standing rather than sitting. And it was very intense. I started to like sway a little bit while I was listening, and I almost kind of took a tumble at one point. Not like Building 7 or anything, but it was very interesting to do that. And of course, he was just a couple booths down from us, so we saw the other people that were going in there and relaxing and having their sessions with him. And I hope he did well, because he came out all the way from South Dakota, and that's a hell of a drive.
It sure is. I enjoyed the chamber as well. The meditation. Well, the meditation was about connecting to the core of the earth and to the galactic center. It was excellent. You become a pillar of light. You're completely connected to your source, both from the earth and in space. It was a very interesting meditation, and very sorely needed at that point. So
certainly for both of us, and for everyone else too, I might add. But to tie in with what Lori McDonald was saying, she mentioned that the word human is actually derived from hue, as in color, and man.
Actually, it's
which
light,
is
I think.
Light.
Light, right.
And man, which is being. So we are literally light beings, is what that means. And in the context of what Brian is doing with the tensor rings, it again adds a very fascinating element to the whole discovery that's going on. And you know, I looked over there from time to time and saw that people were really digging it, and he's doing some good work with that.
I love his work. It's all new to me. I mean, I'd read about it in The Science of Rain, but actually experiencing it is a whole new thing. We have friends that have the tensor rings, and we played a little with them, but I didn't quite get it. I think it maybe wasn't the right rings for us because Brian was able to find the rings that we really needed.
Yeah, we exchanged. We gave him a ziggurat pyramid with a banded amethyst crystal in it, and he gave us some gifts.
Actually, I bought one from him because I wanted to support him too. He's great.
And I got some little like finger-sized coils for when I sleep, and I'll talk about that in a minute because that's pretty interesting.
Well, the one that he said that I should have was the personal harmony ring. And this is one that you wear at your heart, and it has this adjustable cord so everyone can wear it at their heart. And it's just 1 3/4 inch, and it's called Balance and Harmony Ring. And this one was excellent for me when I was getting ill because it helped to kind of calm it down a little. Like wearing it at my heart helped with the heart pains. Well, they were chest pains. It felt like my heart hurt.
But they were right where your heart was.
My chest was just in agony at times. And this ring helped with that a little. And what the Balance and Harmony Ring does, it's similar to orgone. He says in his book about it, the Harmony Ring may be small in physical stature, but is larger than any ascension chamber. Having this ring in your field raises your vibration, cleans and clears and connects. The Balance and Harmony are a most profound, fantastic, phenomenal tensor ring, as are any of the tools subsequently created from the Balance and Harmony. So I loved this ring. And then he suggested he wanted to give me something. So I traded with him the orgonite pyramid, which he totally got, by the way. He totally understood the orgone. Mm-hmm. What he gave me was a 333 megahertz qubit ring, which is a little bigger than a bracelet. It kind of fits around my upper arm.
Almost goes up to your elbow.
Yeah. And this ring here is designed to transform sound. I thought, perfect. You know, he had me choose between this one and another, and this was the one I chose. He said, good, that's for you. This one had a great, great impact on me. I had a theory that it might help with the data transfer sound I hear in my right ear all the time. I'm constantly hearing what I call the fax machine in my ear. Drives me crazy. Now, while many people are being mind controlled by frequency, I have super hearing and I'm not as easily mind controlled. I can be mind controlled, of course. I have been. Not as easily. So I hear the frequencies and they drive me nuts.
Well, not as easily because we're not saturated with all those silly little wireless devices, the tablets and the routers and all of that.
Those silly little iPads and tablets and iPhones and, give me a break, people. Let's use our brains again.
Yeah.
Can we just please get rid of the crutches? GPS. Do you know how to read a map? Yeah. Let's get rid of these electromagnetic crutches that are destroying our health and our brains. Mm-hmm. Anyway, and suppressing our consciousness. But what I found with this one is great. I decided to try sleeping with it, and we didn't use the rain sounds last night. And Gabe slept with his little rings around his finger.
I got these 2 rings. They're a little loose on my middle finger, which is my thickest finger. So I just put them on there. And, typically I have, and of course I'm asleep at the time, so I'm not truly aware of it per se, but I have this issue where I'm exhaling very suddenly and rapidly, and
your breathing wakes me up.
You could describe it better than I could.
It just wakes me up. It's like your breathing is erratic and yeah, you're a little out of control,
but involuntary.
But with these rings, you seem to breathe fine.
The rain sounds that we used to play.
Oh, we still play,
but we didn't last night. But the rain sounds that we play help abate that a little bit. But these, from my understanding, nearly did away with it.
I know, they really did. So this tensor ring that I have, I was wearing it around my wrist, and the ringing in my ear that goes between 2 tones, back and forth between 2 tones, became one solid ring, and then it became kind of quiet. So I could hear just almost nothing in my ear. I could still hear a little bit.
So it severely attenuated that tone or series of tones that you've been hearing.
But when I put it under my pillow directly below my ear, it almost completely removed the noise. And during the day-to-day, I wore the ring around my ear, which is kind of funny. I hung it from my ear, and it took care of that annoying fax machine sound I live with all the time, because I love music.
You
And
looked
love,
you looked a little strange with that hanging that way,
it's
but
okay.
as long as it worked.
Whatever works. You know, I'm not self-conscious,
You
but
can look like a sociopath, but as long as you're healthy.
well, I mean, I love music, but if I have to listen to sounds constantly and never get a moment of silence because I need to block out the data transfer sound, that doesn't allow me the peace I need in my life. So
Yeah,
this ring helped me a
no
lot.
good. That's no good. And for me too. You know, I don't want to be listening to rain sounds for the rest of my life just so that I don't wake you up with my breathing.
Well, I mean, also it's good for you. So I think
Mhm.
this technology is amazing. Our friends that have them have the one that goes around the smart meter, which I was skeptical about because I thought, yeah, it's just a gadget, you know. The meter
Why
really
don't you
needs to be
just get
removed.
rid of it? Yeah.
I still stand by that assertion that they should get rid of it because they have LADWP. And in Los Angeles, it's free to opt out of the smart grid. And it sends a message to the power company that you will not comply with Agenda 21, you will not be controlled, and you will not be surveilled. But people don't want to deal with that. I say, get that thing off your house.
Mm-hmm.
You know, send a
Especially
message.
if it's free. You know, if it
Yeah.
costs $75, we can understand a little bit more. But if it's free, come on, folks. It's right there in front of you. Just takes a couple of follow-up phone calls. That's all.
Well, nonetheless, I do think the Tensor rings are helping with the smart meter. After what I've experienced, I can see that. So that's great.
Mm-hmm. I had a very interesting time with it, and well, that's it for that story. I really wanted to touch on Nibiru again because a couple episodes ago, I tried to talk about it, and you know, there's so much information that sometimes it's hard to remember everything. And you know, Sharon, you and I deal with a lot between our orgonite work and our psychic attacks and fighting the weather war, that just sometimes some of this other stuff, just if I don't think about it and I try and come back to it, I'm just like, I just kind of have a brain fart. But no, I wanted to talk a little bit about Nibiru and the Anunnaki, and you mentioned Zecharia Sitchin earlier, the late Zecharia Sitchin, who really his work really got to me a number of years ago, and I started exploring this on my own. But no, one of my favorite books, and I think I talked about this when we had Jim on the show, was his 1999 book, I think it was, 97, 99, something like that, Rule by Secrecy, which describes exactly what you think it does. But he also talks about ancient civilizations, and he talks a lot about the Anunnaki and Nibiru. And really, he combines the research of several experts. Obviously, Sitchin is one of them, and the late Lloyd Pye is another one. He has a very extensive list of information devoted to that. But I wanted to clear up the story, sort of the official storyline of the Anunnaki and Nibiru, just the very basics. And it sort of goes something like this. So apparently about 450,000 years ago, a group of spacefaring ETs, for lack of a better term, they came to Earth. They were called the Anunnaki, and they came from a rogue planet called Nibiru. Now, a couple interesting things about Nibiru. It's about 3 times larger than planet Earth, and its yearly cycle is based on its orbit around the sun, which is extremely elliptical in nature, even more so than Pluto. It has a cycle of about every 3,600 years. 3,600 years, it comes back into the solar system. And I think some of the Egyptian cuneiform art depicted it as like the sort of like a winged disc, like a circle, like a winged disc. But different cultures have talked about it, and specifically the Sumerians talk about it a lot. Their texts describe it as the 12th planet, which I find really fascinating because, as you know, you can't see anything beyond Saturn without a telescope. Uranus wasn't found until 1781, Neptune in 1846, and Pluto in 1930. Yet they accurately depicted 12 planets because they counted the sun and the moon as planetary bodies, and including Nibiru in that arrived correctly at the number 12. So their texts also describe how billions of years ago, Nibiru entered the solar system, which it does, as I mentioned, every 3,600 years, and it struck a planet called Tiamat. And fragments of Tiamat remained in the original orbit path, which became the asteroid belt. And the largest piece of it was knocked into a new orbit closer to the sun. And over time, this became planet Earth. And one of Nibiru's moons in a subsequent pass changed gravitational forces or whatever it underwent at that point, and that became our own satellite. So the Anunnaki arrive, and they're in search of something. Well, according to Sitchin and Lloyd Pye, they're in search of gold. They're in search of gold to use it in their atmosphere because it has become damaged somehow.
They probably destroyed their own atmosphere like they're trying to destroy ours.
Maybe, but they're in search of gold, and that's why they chose the valley by the Persian Gulf in Iraq, where the Tigris and the Euphrates are.
This would explain a lot about our obsession with gold.
Mm-hmm. And it would also explain a lot of things. Obviously, going back to this planetary collision, it explains a lot about where the asteroid belt came from. And it explains, I think I mentioned in that previous episode, why planet Earth is missing a lot of its crust, particularly where the Pacific Ocean is. It's extremely thin there, sometimes as thin as 5 miles.
Wow.
Whereas in other places, it can be as thick as 65 or 70 miles.
Well, I've heard before that the moon split off from the Earth, but this makes a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm. It explains a lot of things, but yeah, I find the planetary depiction fascinating because you can't see any of these planets past Saturn without a telescope. Yet they knew about them. You can see them in their cave drawings. They knew because
they were told.
Yes.
And I know I've heard about this before, like cultures that knew about Sirius, the dog star, before there were telescopes. So they knew, they had an encounter.
Mm-hmm. They certainly did. And so these Anunnaki came in search of gold, and that leads to another item, which is the genetic manipulation of the species that was on the Earth as they came. And that leads into a whole other rabbit hole of the hybridization of the human race.
Right.
Monkeys bred with aliens to create humans. And apparently this is what the Anunnaki were up to, but they screwed up.
They screwed up because they made us too intelligent, too compassionate.
Not just compassion. We have souls.
We have souls.
We are compassionate. We have empathy.
Mm.
We have a mothering quality. We care for our children. We don't just abandon them like they do.
Do they abandon their children?
Mm-hmm.
The Anunnaki?
Or I don't know about them specifically, but there are entities that do not care for their children.
The reptilians.
In the manners that humans do. Yes.
The reptilians don't raise their own children, according to Ken Rolla. And to me, that would explain a lot about why the state thinks it can interfere in family affairs and force vaccines.
Mm-hmm. And force chemotherapy.
Right. Or at the risk of parents losing their children to the state.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a reptilian influence in our government, no doubt.
And that ties into mind control and what we just talked about with the wireless devices. See, everything is completely related here.
And it's all related to the ETs.
Mm-hmm. It can all be tied to that.
Yeah. And our quest for gold. I mean, we've been bred to want gold.
An angle that was conspicuously absent from Contact in the Desert. But
which angle? The
ET connection with all of these suppressed things.
No, I think it was there. I think it had certain speakers covered it more than others,
but not in the solution-oriented way that it needed to be.
Well, that's my problem too.
It really needed to be brought to light, and it was not from at least from the talks that we attended and from our the information we gathered from other people at the event.
Well, I like that Laura Eisenhower mentions all this stuff and says, why are we putting up with this? We could be free now. But I think that what's important is that we need a tool to help us with that. And that's why we use orgone.
We do.
I'm seeing the tensor fields are very helpful in that. I think we need energetic tools because we're so compromised through mind control and frequency and poisoning.
And Laura mentions something like transhumanism, for example, and then we leave the talk and we're by the parking lot, and sure enough, there's a car that goes by kicking up dust everywhere that's blasting transhumanist music.
Exactly. Why aren't people listening to Laura? That's what I want to know. Listen.
Anyway, it's very interesting that there was this suppression of human DNA during this hybridization process to deactivate our DNA. Right. And that again goes back to a lot of what people like Greg Braden and Dr. Len Horowitz talk about, is that we have 64 potential amino acid codes in our DNA, yet only 20 of them are currently active. And what's with this junk DNA that they keep talking about all the time? It's not junk. It's just inert. It's dormant. And we are in the process of activating what has been artificially suppressed. And that's why they're freaking out, because once that inactive DNA is no longer inactive, once it's active, we're flying. For lack of a better expression. We are transcending dimensions, and their food source goes away.
Because they feed on us.
Yes, the parasitic entities feed on our suffering. And what does a parasite do? It has to convince the host to provide the parasite with food. The host does not benefit from that. The parasite does. But the host doesn't know that it's only doing what the parasite wants at its own expense. Once it wakes up and realizes that, it's all over for the parasite. And that's exactly what is happening on a macro level today. And that's exactly why they're freaking out. That's why the vaccine agenda is being pushed so hard. That's why the GMOs are out. That's why fluoride is being added, and wireless devices are being added to every possible thing, like cameras.
God forbid you should plug it in with a USB cable.
Yeah, God forbid. That's why all of this is being done, to attempt to keep that DNA in a dormant state, and it's not working.
Well, the science that denies that this DNA can be activated, the science that just calls it junk DNA, is a very limited science. It's a 3D mechanistic view. It denies the divine feminine. It's a very masculine view. It's the view that says that nothing that's going on in ourselves affects the world outside of ourselves, which we now know to be false because of the morphogenic field that we all are a part of.
Which Rupert Sheldrake talks about a lot. And yes, we all think independently of one another. Nothing is related. And by the way, the Earth is at the center of the universe. And if you think differently,
and it's flat,
you'll be burned at the stake.
Yeah. Well, we found out a long time ago the Earth was round. Sorry, flat Earth guys. The Earth is round, okay? But, that really upset a lot of people too, didn't it?
Yes, it did. And they went through a lot to defend their cherished theories that they must hold on to, and even up to killing people who disagreed with them. Okay. So this has happened before, folks.
How about that South Park episode where Eric Cartman goes into the future to get his Nintendo Wii?
Oh, yeah.
Because
where the groups of atheists are fighting each other, and then at the end he finds out the only reason they're fighting is because they can't agree on what name to call themselves.
Well, and in the future, what ended up happening was that science became religion. And so everybody was a devout atheist, and all these different factions were fighting simply over what to call themselves. And
The United Atheist League or the Allied Atheist Alliance or
and they were blowing each other's brains out over
Yes.
this. So they would say, "Science, damn you," you know.
and yeah.
And so they believed in science as a religion.
Science, H logic.
Exactly. I love this episode of South Park, by the way.
It's a 2-part episode. That's hilarious.
It's absolutely hilarious. So he really literally goes into the future because he can't wait a couple weeks for the Nintendo Wii to come out.
So he freezes himself, and of course his friend forgets to unfreeze him, and then he travels.
Well, he gets covered by an avalanche, so there's nothing that can be done. And
right.
Anyway, so in the future, science is God. And what we're seeing is that's actually the present, that science is God, because so many people deny spiritual thought and can't merge science and spirituality. But where we are right now as an ascending human race is at that merging of science and spirituality. It has to be done. If everything is just science, and the unseen is ignored, we're not going to get anywhere.
Mm-hmm. And I don't understand how people could make the ridiculous and erroneous assumption that science is somehow immune to something called corruption.
Right. And another thing is, science is supposed to be about discovery and learning new things. So when there's a mistake in science, it gets corrected over time. But we're at a place right now where anything science has discovered up to this point that's it. It's immovable.
No more corrections. We know everything.
Isn't that dogma? Isn't that religion?
That's exactly what it is.
Right.
But if you say that, they'll just get even more defensive and freaked out and flustered, and it's a bad scene today in mainstream science.
We had one couple come and visit us at our booth. It really
boy.
struck a chord.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why'd you tell about them?
That was very interesting. We had all kinds of people come into our booth, and that's part of why we both had to be there, is because Sharon, you're talking to someone and you're very engrossed with them, and then someone else comes over and they can either listen mid-conversation and miss half of it, or I can start talking with them too. So we had to both be there most of the time. So this one couple came over. They were an older couple, I'd say at least 50s, if not 60s.
Like my parents' age.
Maybe a little younger.
Yeah.
But it was very straight. They had matching T-shirts.
Oh, they were one of the matching T-shirt couples. Yeah. There were a lot of those there.
Not passing judgment.
No.
But
they're all having a good time. They want to know about UFOs.
The woman was fascinated with what we were talking about, and we started at the beginning, describing orgone energy, what it is, what it does, describing orgonite. It's a free energy device, how it harnesses it, how it utilizes it. And the guy was there was a disconnect somewhere where he just, I can't remember how it started. But
he was saying that the damage is already done to our planet and nothing can be fixed.
Yes.
And we were talking about how to fix the damage.
No, that's not true.
And I even mentioned how GMOs can be reverted, which we learned from Ken Rolla, which is that they do naturally revert. And I mentioned that the consciousness, the genetic blueprint is in the consciousness, not the DNA. And that seemed to bother him. And he was talking about a lot about what the government says about this and that.
The Defense Department and documents that they've released. Read this. And
I do read that garbage, but do you really believe what the government is going to be telling us?
Again, didn't I mention this in hour one? We don't just take at face value what these government and military people say, because they're very mind controlled and they're not going to tell you the full story. Far from it.
Well, I do read the documents, but here's one, okay? This is the big document that's always referenced in these talks about geoengineering, weather as a force multiplier, owning the weather in 2025. The Air Force document that came out around 1996.
Yeah.
95, it was 96. People were talking about this back then. But here's the thing. If the United States Air Force put this document out on the internet and made it extremely accessible, do you think it's giving us the whole story? I did read the document, by the way. I read the entire document. But do you think it's giving us the whole story?
To give another South Park reference, that reminds me of the 9/11 related episode where George Bush is talking about his his little file folder that he's holding with, this is the secret documents no one will ever get, and then he yawns, and then just casually drops the folder on the ground.
Exactly. If they're putting it out there, then you can bet there's not the full story.
That's right.
And that's what I talk about with the geoengineering is I used to kind of just take it at face value and say, that is the story. Look, here are the documents. I've got to the point now through working with orgone, new channels have opened up in my mind, and I've seen things that can't be explained by the Air Force document. Now, I believe that our government is using weather modification for warfare. I do see that happening. I do see that private contractors are using weather modification to control commodities markets. I believe this is all happening. I see it in action, but there is another level to it.
That's not the full story.
It's not the full story. There's a level way above this. That, full scale manipulation of the atmosphere planet-wide, that full spectrum dominance that Alana Freeland talks about, with no solutions, by the way. She's still got half the story there.
Still in the fear matrix.
That's the phrase that I said that drove the couple away.
That's right. That's right. You said that.
I said,
I totally forgot
you're
about
still
that.
in the fear matrix. And they said, come on, let's go. And he took her away.
Well, he had been trying to kind of grab her by the arm and kind of pry her away, but she was so into it.
Yeah, but when I said the fear matrix, that was it.
Then he just
couldn't admit it. He couldn't admit it.
Then he just imposed his will and just literally dragged her away. But I think you made enough of an impression and said, check it out for yourself. See, she took a card.
Yeah, as long as she still has it.
Yeah, as long as he didn't.
She'll see me on Gaia. She'll see me talking to George Norrie about it. Then she'll be like, hey, it's that crazy girl from Contact.
Or Buzzsaw when it airs. You never know.
So, it'll come back to her at some point and she'll get to hear about it. I guess what I was talking about before I went off on that tangent was that we're getting only part of the story. We were talking about the Air Force document. We're talking about the full spectrum dominance of planet Earth. That's well beyond our government. I see orb sprayers. I see the multidimensional aspects of the chemtrailers. We can make their trails disappear. We can make them disappear. We do all-out battle with these entities. And frankly, I think we're killing them.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen evidence that we're actually killing them with orgone energy because they need deadly orgone radiation. They need a death energy in order to survive. Their death energy is to them, what's death to them is life to us, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. They're completely the opposite of us. And one thing that one of the people that came by our booth mentioned that I found very interesting was the theory, I guess you could say, that perhaps these DOR masses are wormholes or portals for those entities. And when we clean those out, again, that goes back to what you just mentioned, that perhaps we are literally killing them. We're driving them away.
We are at least, that is a very interesting theory. We are at least preventing them from coming onto our Earth and into our atmosphere.
And feeding.
Right. Because orgone is multidimensional. This is scalar waves, what Ken Rolla calls scalar energy. That's orgone. It goes far into space. It goes through matter. It's faster than the speed of light. We're creating vortexes here on Earth that go past our atmosphere and into space. Mm-hmm. That's how we're able to throw those geoengineering toxins away from the Earth. So very interesting theory. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I'm going to look into this a little bit more.
And another guy who came and visited the booth was the man who complained about entities attaching to the lower chakras, and we could both tell that he needed some assistance.
He needed some help.
Because they were letting him know we're plugged into you.
Absolutely.
We're attached. We're feeding now. Just that kind of total arrogance of, we're here and there's nothing you can do about it.
Right. And that arrogance is completely dispelled when we regain our power and they can't feed. And we say, oh yeah, you think you're attached to me? Well, here's a bunch of orgone. And by the way, I feel great.
Mm-hmm. But it can't be forced. It has to be genuine.
It has to be genuine.
It has to be genuine, and it's a process. It doesn't just happen like that.
Well,
because they're going to try and come again. It's like with our work. Orgone rush to a new area cleans out all the DOR. But after a few days, it comes back again. So it requires constant work, and it's a learning process, and it's work, just like anything else. It's work.
George Ritchell called it maintenance gifting, by the way. We do maintenance gifting
Mm-hmm.
because we have to keep the orgone energy high in an area in order to keep it clean. But we also have our own energy fields that assist. So we're learning more and more how to use that. And we find that everywhere we go, that the orgone works even harder because we're also putting our own orgone into it, because we've stripped away a lot of the noise that was preventing our consciousness from being what it can be. And that's exactly what the poisons and the frequencies are, is a frequency fence. So this is where the personal responsibility comes in, and this is what people don't want to hear. You got to put the work in.
Mm-hmm.
You got to just, some people say, I don't want to give up eating meat because I like it so much. And then,
I don't want to give up the cell phone because I have to be connected with my friends, or I don't want to.
Is that a true connection though?
I don't want to give up the Wi-Fi router because I like taking my computer and balancing it extremely close to my genitals while I drink a Diet Coke and snack on Flamin' Hot Cheetos. Hello?
I know.
Do you see what's going on here? It's just...
Well, it's about personal responsibility.
Don't we talk about this on every show? I feel like we just hammer this into the ground, but still people come up to us and they're like, the orgone isn't working. What else can I do? No, you haven't tried it. You haven't worked hard enough. You need to work hard. If you don't work hard, you can't earn what has been taken away from you.
Yeah, you're not just going to wake up one day and be ascended. Yep. I was watching TV last night. I was watching Game of Thrones, and I was eating some McDonald's, and then I went to sleep. And then the next day I woke up and, oh my God, I was ascended. I could see through multiple dimensions. I could travel in a Merkaba.
My body had transformed into shafts of light that were not of this world.
It's not going to happen if you're just in that electronic false matrix. And this is a lot of the transhumanist agenda, is to fill us with metals, bombard us with frequencies, and put us in this total electronic matrix. They don't need RFID chips under our arms. We took the bait. We took the electronic devices, the surveillance devices. We're glued to them. So we don't need the RFID chip in the arm. That's just, an exaggeration.
It is. You're absolutely right. And we had a hell of a cleanup today, didn't we?
Oh, yeah. And so speaking of what we're talking about here, the power that we have is immense. Today, we woke up and it was eerie outside. There was an absolutely whited out sky, but you could still see a kind of a pale sun coming through. And
this only happens about once every 2 months now.
It used to be every day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not kidding. It used to be chemtrail whiteout every single day. Until we started doing our work, it started chipping away at it. And it took a long time to get to the point where we are now, where it's very rare. Now, people in LA are still telling me, now that I live 2 hours north, that it's terrible there every day. Well, when they send me pictures, I could see transmutations. Because again, they want to see a perfect sky. They don't understand that the parasites keep spraying and they don't know what the cleanup looks like. So again, I say, look at my site, learn what you're looking at, understand what the cleanup looks like, because it looks weird too, but it's being cleaned. Today, it was absolute whiteout. I put it up on my blog. Check it out. It's going to be the top entry at thekembo.tumblr.com. It got completely cleaned. I was as surprised as any. With all the work we've done over the last 2 years and the miraculous things we've seen, I still didn't think that this level of pollution could get cleaned that quickly. By late afternoon, the sky was completely blue in every direction. Mm-hmm. It is amazing. Watch the funnel clouds, the spiraling cleanup. It's the upside down tornado of the scalar wave vortex. We have lots of orgonite. We have a chembuster, obelixes. But most of all, we have our heart energy.
That's right. We have that, and it can't be compromised unless you allow it to be compromised. We tell this to everyone. All of our talks that we do, every vendor event we ever do, we tell people you have to have your own power inherent in you. If that power gets subverted or compromised or sabotaged, you have to get it back. And that's what's going on a large scale on this planet today, is that people are taking back their power and the parasites are losing, their food source is dwindling, 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 and eventually it will be gone, and the human race can finally be liberated.
So we are indeed in a battle. It's an interplanetary battle. This is intergalactic war, but it's fought on the etheric plane. So this is something we can all win because it all comes from within ourselves. You've been listening to The Human Frequency on American Freedom Radio. Please visit our website, thechembo.com, learn more about orgone energy and support our work. Learn to make your own orgonite, thechembo.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.